sort of a lesson. I spent the summer in France doing research on workers' movements, and a lesson that I learned talking to people there is that if anyone knows what happened in the French elections this summer, a leftist coalition won that election. And the problem that they have right now is that sort of the Liberal Party, the Macron, which would be about equivalent to the Democrats here, have chosen to not appoint a government of that socialist coalition, of that leftist coalition, and are instead openly courting offers from the right to form a government. And it's increasingly apparent in Europe and in the United States that the greater friend to capital, the greater friend to the Democrats is the right, is fascist. Not workers, not the working class, not leftists, not the people. And we need to be increasingly aware of that as we move forward with this line of thinking of the lesser of two evils, because in the long haul, capital views us as the enemy more than views fascism as the enemy.
Thank you everyone. My name is Alejandro Villalpando. I wanted to just recap for anyone who needed some support and kind of getting some of the main thoughts of you all in Spanish that y'all shared. So I'll just start with la doctora Tina Bell Wright empezó hablando un poco de los desafíos y las amenazas que existen ahorita con tal vez si gana el Trump. Una de las cosas primarias que se enfoca ella es la violencia y la amenaza avanzada de género contra mujeres que van a ser criminalizadas por lo que pasa con su cuerpo y las decisiones que tienen con sus cuerpos. La doctora Rochelle Brooks nos recuerda que una de las cosas que tenemos que hacer es no ser como discípulos del Partido Demócrata, sino que usar nuestra posición colectiva, amasar una organización grande para poder negociar esa relación y esa difícil relación contra el Partido Demócrata en lo inmediato, pero al mismo tiempo crear solidaridades y programas donde nos podamos ayudar a nosotros unidos, porque sabemos que los políticos pues no nos dan nada, la verdad. Nos quitan mucho, nos hacen muchas promesas, pero no nos dan nada. Pero también no podemos aceptar que venga el 45 otra vez y sea 47. Ese es el pedo, ¿no? No podemos regresar con el Trump, porque él, como nos recuerda el compa Liam ahí, él dice que tenemos que hacer localmente. Otra cosa que dice la doctora Tina Bell Wright, I'm going back and forth on my messy notes, es que hay que enfocarnos en 5 estados, porque en 5 estados donde está el pedo con este Trump. 5 estados son Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Michigan y Ohio. Wisconsin, allí es donde está el rollo. Aquí va a ganar la señora esa, you know? Entonces nos recuerda de eso. Y Liam nos dice, sí, hay que enfocarnos en esos 5 estados, pero también tenemos que pensar aquí en el estado de California, ¿qué tenemos que hacer al mismo tiempo para crear un partido de trabajadores, o que por lo menos un partido para trabajadores que verdaderamente sea independiente? ¿Y qué podemos hacer en este estado al mismo tiempo? No nomás de esta elección, sino que al mismo tiempo se puede crear, porque sabemos que el partido de los demócratas no es alternativa a los republicanos. Y al fin, el compa Andrés al inicio nos recuerda que el problema pues de la amenaza de Trump es que si él viene, va a atacar a la habilidad que tenemos de organizar legalmente, y tenemos que seguir, si él quiere atacar a la libertad de expresión en este país, quiere decir que nos va a atacar a nosotros que somos sindicalistas, y es un ataque, una amenaza a nuestras familias. No, hay que ser claro. Y lo último, y eso es una de las cosas, ¿no? Y también nos recuerdan, Dr. Tina Bell Wright y Liam Moore nos recordaron que hay que pensar en lo local, ¿no? Cómo se crean las cosas aquí. Cuando hay bronca o se armen broncas, ¿qué vamos a hacer cuando se cierren las tiendas? Y si uno dice, no, eso no pasa, ¿cómo chingada no pasa si pasó en el COVID-19? ¿No había papel para limpiarse las nalgas? ¿No se acuerdan? ¿Qué va a pasar si viene un fascista otra vez a recordar aquí? nos van a manipular, es una amenaza muy grande. Entonces el desafío lo tenemos nosotros aquí, y ¿qué vamos a hacer todos colectivamente? No podemos andar nomás y decir, oh, pues tal y tal nos va a ayudar. So those are some things that I gleaned from you all. I did want to ask for Andres and Dr. Brooks to reflect on, both of you all talked about like the immediate problems, right? We understand the ideological ones. I think everyone here understands that the Democrats are not our friends. Like no one's under this illusion, right? And we know what the Republicans represent. And I think there's a collective understanding that these fools represent capitalist interests and are the parties of the capitalist class, right? The ruling class. So, but there are these other things, the day-to-day realities, right? And so for our communities, right? You mentioned black single mothers, and you say you're from Compton, so you know I'm from South Central. Andres, you talked about your families, right? Our people are working class immigrants who came to survive, right? I'm not going to say a better life, but to survive, right? To advance life. What are those day-to-day problems, and how, like, you know, in your experiences, like, what is the threat of Trump under that? Like, to take food away, you know what I mean? Like, what are those things?
The first thing that comes to mind is stripping us of the right to unionize, to come together. I think being able to have these spaces where people that have a common reality can talk about their needs and work together to leverage their collective power is something that folks in Compton and South Central, these unions, Local 36, roofers unions, teachers unions, we need that. We need to make sure that we have livable wages, right? Without that collective power, the rights, we lose those rights, and the powers that be maintain the power. We need to be able to organize, we need to be able to fight for in wages that pay a livable wage. We need to be able to have child care for our kids. We need to be able to have Social Security for our parents. My mom had to move in with me. I'm a single mom who's also supporting my mom. It's intergenerational, and being a first generation college graduate, that story's not told often, right? We're sandwiched in between two generations who, my mom she's only in her 50s, so she has no pension. All the rights that have been stripped away from her are now intergenerational in the negative effects, right? So it's gonna negatively impact me because she's not financially stable. It's gonna negatively impact my kids because of that. So, you know, Republicans' ideology that people can work their whole lives is not factual, right? Especially if you're in hard labor. People get older, they deserve to retire, and we need to have a system that ensures that. So those are major differences. I'm in education. My kids want to go to college, they can't afford it oftentimes, right? California is unique in that it offers, I think it's called the California Promise, where students can go for 2 years for free. That's revolutionary. That changes family dynamics for generations, being able to have access to higher education. That's something that Trump does not believe in, access to higher education. Thinking about being a mom, I had a baby a year ago. Medical bills are astronomical. I'm in education, so I have pretty good insurance. And it was still thousands of dollars for me to have a baby in this country. And not to mention, maternity leave did not exist. It doesn't exist federally. It exists in California. So these are things that we have to consider, right? There's real life day-to-day implications that the Republican Party believes should be taken from us, and the Democrats want in place to an extent. Yeah, I think those are the things that are important to me, my family, that it's also why I showed up here today, right? We need those stories told. We need people to talk about their day-to-day experiences. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you.
How I see this as a member of the union for over 20 years, and I achieved all those benefits and thinking that I retired in 10 years after 20 plus years. Just been thinking about retirement because my family is enjoying part of the benefits via the union. insurance, health, vision, and having a decent life. Now my daughter's in college, my son almost done with high school, and not necessity to work my kids as I work because I have a good job, a stable job. I mean, a job is hard. It's hard. It's brutal. Roofing is brutal. But I enjoy it. But it doesn't. I enjoy it. I never seen like, I have to go to work because I know the benefits. I was being thinking in the future. And now that we're in trade, I mean, we feel like traded with Trump against unions, it's going to damage my family and all the members from Local 36. Because most of them, I think we're the same mentality. Is travel, hustle, work, go home, and someday enjoy part of my retirement. Which as a local place, we have 2 retirements. Dental, vision, everything, not the full package. Nothing is free, it costs to us. We put up talking things to get our retirement. And some want to be in empty pockets. They don't want to make the effort and do for us, for members. Now it's going to be like, I'm guessing, like we're still with that. I think it's not fair because we deserve a good life after retirement because that's what we bought all those 30 years to get a decent life. Because now we hear all constantly that Social Security is going to be empty, you won't get anything. So I don't depend. I never been thinking of the Social Security because it constantly in my head like, it's going to run out of money, it's going to run out of money. Now what really depends on my retirement for the union. And for all of us as members, I think we're on the same page. Is working hard, getting our money we're supposed to do, and collecting this money for the time of retirement. I want to organize, mobilize, and do what I'm supposed to do. For my part, I worked in the last election. I was in Nevada, in Arizona for 2 weeks, and I stayed working for that campaign. And now I'm going to do it again because I have to do my part. Because in reality, I see what happens to me is going to affect all of the members. We're in the same boat. Whatever happens to the unions is going to affect the same equal because we're the same here. That's how I see it. That's why I'm here because I don't hate Trump, don't get me wrong, and nothing personal. It's basically, once they try to get involved in my benefits in my future, it's going to hurt. That's why I said they're going to put that finger in the wound. It's going to affect my family and all of the rest of us.
I do want to bring up one. I have $300,000 student loan debt, so I think you guys can imagine what the process of trying to buy a home would look like. It's nearly impossible. But privatization of housing, corporations being able to come in South Central, LA, Compton, and buy up all these homes, Airbnb them, rent them out, whatever it is, right? We need to be able to have families buying single-family homes, living in them, prevent corporate interests from purchasing homes in our neighborhood because they're driving up prices, right? That's why rent is so high. That's why housing is so expensive.
Right.
So yeah, that's something else that I feel like we need to be advocating for. And then just lastly, this metaphor is something that I heard and it stuck with me. Voting is like taking out the trash, right? Nobody wants to take out the trash, but if you don't take it out, shit starts to stink. Right. And that's what we're gonna do, right? We're gonna make sure that we get out there and we don't let shit stink more than it already does right now. The Debt Collective is primarily white, college-educated folks, middle class, well, working class, but not from the hood, right? So we, as Black organizers, were like, okay, it's pretty apparent that somehow the space is marginalizing Black people who are most impacted by debt, so what are we doing wrong? So we started like a Black Debtors Caucus, and we just started talking to Black people about their experiences with debt, with organizing, and I think the theme that we found most common was radical invitations. Like, if you're not radically inviting Black people to spaces that we're talking about rights, we're talking about unions, we're using inaccessible language most times, if we're not radically inviting they're not gonna come, right? They don't feel like that's the space for them. So I think radical invitations go a long way. You gotta speak people's language too. You know, I think, yeah, a lot of times things are just inaccessible. So we gotta go into spaces with the goal of building community. We gotta go into spaces providing aid, right? A lot of Black folks that I know aren't able to make it to things because we don't have childcare. I was gonna bring my baby here. I have a ruptured Achilles. I couldn't explain all the things that's going on in my life, right? So that prevents me from showing up to spaces a lot of times because my personal needs aren't being met. So we gotta meet people's needs first and foremost. So when we're organizing, we have to have childcare. We gotta have food. We gotta have resources to education. We gotta have money, right? Leverage those relationships with allies. Get white people to give you money. Get capitalists to give you money and redistribute it. Give it to the people that really need it the most and meet their needs through mutual aid. But most importantly, you gotta figure out what people need, which requires talking to people and getting to know them. And I think a lot of times people are afraid of that. So yeah, get to know people, get to know their needs, and meet them.
So I also, I'm an educator, so I do believe in the importance of education. Just learning, lifelong learning, you can read it on your own, but also in our public institutions. I believe in public over private, right? So we have public institutions that are accountable to us. And so there are spaces and people to meet, like myself, that can bring you out to our college and meet other folks. And then like Cliff said, I work with cultural workers. So we have a Hip Hop Congress chapter in LA. We have one that's starting in South Central LA. That group right there will be a key group to organize with and build with, because not only, our cultural workers, but also working class organizers, because as you said, often, and what I've also said, like sometimes organizing and, protesting and the things that, people do, many times, like I think you said, you're at work, it's a luxury that everyone doesn't always have, right? And so that's why she speaks of allies that have more of this privilege and luxury than others. But there are spaces that, working people from the community, block parties, my family just went to a block party right here in Inglewood, just things that we can create ourselves with our community that we don't have to look for other people to do. It's just knowing, who's the organizers in your community, who are the artists, who are this, who are that, and building them yourself. And so I think that that's really the key, and this is kind of what Hip Hop Congress has always been, kind of a grassroots, find the people around you, what they do, how they want to build, and build chapters or whatever, wherever you are. So yeah.
We have to build a statewide movement of working people. We're all facing the same issues, and I thank Cliff and his local for having this discussion today, because more working people need to have this kind of discussion. What are we going to do politically? What we're concerned about, I'm a journalist, I'm in the CWA Pacific Media Workers Guild, but what we're concerned is fascism, one of the important things. And we have to take it seriously. One of the issues is, what are we going to do if Trump is elected? That's a serious danger. And the union bureaucracy do not want to even discuss that. They're saying, let's give all our money to Harris, she'll save us. Harris is not going to save the working people. There's a great danger, and what Trump will do if he's re-elected or if he seizes power, because he said he's not going to accept anything but coming back to power. That's what he said. So another insurrection, another coup. We have to get organized, and we have to educate workers about fascism. Fascism is a natural result of the crisis of capitalism, of the crisis of imperialism. When the United States invaded Iraq and Syria and Libya, millions of people left those countries, were forced out by war to Europe. And then what happened is the fascists said, the immigrants are the problem. Not capitalism, not imperialist war, the immigrants. Same thing happening here. The wars in Central America that we support, the coups, the generals that forces people to this country, the sanctions, and then we blame them. The capitalist media and the capitalist politicians, including Harris, blame the people. These people, these immigrant workers who are trying to survive, like all of us. They've been forced to immigrate. And so I think we have to have more discussion and debate in the labor movement about fascism. What are we going to do to fight it? We need a united front of all working people. And I'm with a committee called the United Front Committee for the Labor Party, because we do need a labor party. We need a mass working class political alternative that has a working class program. We don't have that. We have the Democrats, Republicans, and small minor parties. But that requires a debate in the labor movement, because the union bureaucracy, and I've been fighting for a labor party for most of my life, is not interested in a break from the Democrats. In fact, they don't want to have a debate about a labor party. There was a labor party movement earlier, led by Tony Mazzocchi, and their whole point was to pressure the Democrats not to run candidates. I think we have to start thinking about running working class candidates, and it's good that Cliff ran, but how about there's going to be a state election for governor next year? Are we going to have a working class candidate, or is it going to be one Democrat against a Republican? We have to get some working class candidates on a working class program that will represent people. The other thing is privatization. The Democrats are pushing privatization. In San Francisco, they're trying to destroy community colleges. No money. They're closing schools using FICMAT and Inglewood. They're privatizing schools and selling them off to charters. This is union busting. And the Democrats are using their control of the state to bring privatization and outsourcing. So we have to have a united campaign in the labor movement politically, ideologically. Why is there no national campaign against privatization in this country? The teachers, AFSCIO, their major unions, my union, have public workers, but there's no political education campaign against privatization. So we need to unite workers to take up that struggle. Last point is the question of what happened at UCLA, because the attack at UCLA was very important. Fascists and Zionists came together and they physically assaulted that peaceful encampment. And that was organized. It actually was a criminal conspiracy. It was illegal because they criminally got together to physically assault a peaceful demonstration.
This is the tail end.
Okay.
This panel, once we bring up the next panel, we'll have plenty of time.
Okay, so anyway, I'm going to say, we want to talk about fascism. We should talk about what happened at UCLA. There's going to be a true tribunal, labor community tribunal in Los Angeles, because only one person has been arrested. And there were many people involved in that fascist attack. So I think that's something we can all unite around and educate people what's really going on. Thanks.
Hello everyone, I'm Julian. I'll be in the next panel, so I'll just be brief. But I think I just wanted to reiterate this concept of the Workers' Party as the organizational structure that will let us concentrate all our efforts towards fighting against the capitalist state, something we have to do because whatever gains we get in this system, whatever salary raises, whatever if we get, for example, healthcare for all, I think as history has shown us, it's only temporary under this system. Unfortunately, while we can get those inside the system, we can get another Reagan, we can get another Trump that will utilize the state power in order to, to crush those gains we had conquested. It has happened in Latin America with neoliberalism, how this concept of reducing the state at the end was an attack towards the people, and they basically got all the gains that the people had obtained through this, through unions, through all this struggle, how all of that went away. No? So that is why the Workers' Party is so necessary in order to concentrate all these efforts, not to gain necessarily some immediate things, again, such as wages, which can also be a way of radicalizing people, but not necessarily the end goal. The end goal should be to overthrow the capitalist class, because it is them, the ones that will always try to take back whatever we gain. No? Only under a system where the workers have control over the means of production is the one that will let workers live in peace. Otherwise, we will be always in this constant struggle, so that is why we need to focus our efforts on a single organizational structure that will let us concentrate our efforts and coordinate together. That's I guess, the importance of this Workers' Party.
I just want to make a couple concluding statements and then last words from our panel, and we'll bring up our next panel. As an affiliate of the World Federation of Trade Unions, we're affiliated to the unions in France, the CGT, particularly the railroad workers unions, that were at the forefront of leading the fight against Macron, particularly his actions to increase the retirement age, something that we're going to be facing probably soon in the United States that Andres was talking about. The railway workers unions led general nationwide strikes against the Macron government, but in the election recently, where they were facing a fascist threat to take control of state power, the French communists, the socialists, the Green Party, the Unbowed Party, they formed a tactical alliance with Macron, the very ruler that they had been shutting down the country to fight against. They formed an alliance with him to defeat the fascist threat. Not because they thought that Macron was going to give them control of the government or give them power, but to defeat the imminent threat, and then they will be fighting against Macron instead of fighting against the fascists. So it's important that we evaluate the conditions within which we are able to organize against our enemies. And that is what the moment is with 8 weeks left before this election. The comment that was made about the 2008 election and Obama versus McCain, we have to evaluate these analyses based on the time and the place and the condition. The election was not about, will Obama solve all of our problems and liberate everybody? Amiri Baraka, who was referred to, wrote in his statement, it's on the table, that Baraka was not running for president of the NAACP or the Black Panther Party or the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He was running for executive authority of the imperialist United States against who was mentioned as a war criminal, John McCain. On the heels of 2 terms of President Bush with the war on terror, the defeat of McCain was a repudiation of the Bush regime. Obama, for all of his crimes internationally, was able to accomplish things that under McCain would have never been imaginable. So if the choices that was in front of people at that time was McCain or Obama, to not vote to defeat McCain is to help McCain. And this is the same mathematics, the same calculus that we're facing now. To not vote to defeat Trump in 8 weeks is to help Trump. Lastly, to say that the only election that was worthwhile was to support Abraham Lincoln in 1860 because he gave weapons to enslave black people. Abraham Lincoln did not give weapons to enslave black people in 1860. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln said that if he could preserve the Union without freeing a single slave, he would have done it. But Frederick Douglass, the leading abolitionist, split with the abolitionist party to support Lincoln's candidacy because he understood that if Stephen Douglas' party won, if the slave party took state power of the government in the United States, it would have expanded slavery and the conditions would have been extremely more difficult within which to organize. Douglas never said that Lincoln was going to solve everybody's problems. So, and then there was a mention about the speech of Malcolm X, essentially that Malcolm said that you give your vote to the Democrats and you get nothing in return. He said that you're a political chump. But further on in the speech, Malcolm also says that he would not remove the Democrats for the Republicans. So we should follow the entirety of the analysis, not just certain sections. The outcome of the election in November is who's going to take control of state power. Is it going to be Trump and MAGA and white supremacy and fascism, or is it going to be something that's not quite that? And how will that affect the conditions within which we organize to build our own independent political power?
I'm a student of Ella Baker, who's part of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And she was quoted as saying, strong people don't need strong leaders. And so I tried to keep that as kind of my organizing principle all the time. What are we doing to strengthening ourselves, our communities, that we don't have to look towards others that don't have our best interests for our benefit. But Cliff is right. One of the two will be the president. Trump, who actually is just really, you know, using white fragility and white intransigence for his own, to try to keep out of prison reasons. He's basically tapped in to a very long-standing, based out of, well, at least, you know, you don't have anything, but at least you're not black, which has been the line told to white people in this country for hundreds of years. And they bought into it, many have bought into it, and now are supporting someone who has no business having nuclear codes, quite honestly, because he's just not smart, okay? He's just not smart, but they are buying into it because of this white nationalist, white supremacy thing. So whatever happens, you should be prepared. You should be prepared to understand that, yeah, there are consequences. So under this Biden presidency, you know, I see what's happening in Israel and the support, and all I see is U.S. history. This is literally the same settler history that the people here that have already been put on reservations and down to 1% have already lived through. And I also see, though, that there are Republicans blocking these student debt relief programs, and me in California and my union able to organize around it, and I just got rid of almost $100,000 of debt, just like that. It wouldn't have happened. It would not have happened if not for this, his policy that wasn't blocked in another state. And so these are the things that we have to think about. You're going to have to live regardless, and there's only going to be one or two places. It's going to be either under a Trump presidency or under a Harris one. So that's the reality. So figure out how you're going to live and organize under one of those.
Yeah, I think voting is a strategy. When I think about what's most important to me, it's ensuring that folks' material needs are met. And when I look at, just like what was mentioned, Biden or the current administration's policies, are all material needs being met? Absolutely not. But will more be stripped away? Absolutely. And that's what we're doing. That's what I'm doing. Just leveraging this strategy to ensure that we have the space, we have the opportunity. Trump is openly saying, he's saying the quiet part out loud that he's going to be president forever. He's going to criminalize the things that, right? This is going to be a criminal act. Opposing the state is going to be a criminal act. That's how you stay in power. That's the only way he can stay in power, is if he criminalizes the things that we're doing today. And we need to fight against that. So we need to resist. Most importantly, we need to organize. Show up for your communities in the best ways that you can with mutual aid. And I think we can build a future that allows for a workers' party.
I do want to return to the question that you asked about UCLA. I think it tells us something about a different question you asked of what to do if Trump wins, and even what to do if Trump doesn't win with the rise of the fascism. What ended the attack that night was not intervention by the state or police or university officials. It was collective action by students, workers, and their allies. And a lesson to be learned from it is that police inaction there is not a bug of the system, it's a feature of the system. That whether a Democrat or Republican, the alliance with capital and fascism runs deep. And if we're to enact change through collective action of the working class, then we need to do it together, and that night offered sort of a blueprint of how that action can be.
Well, I think we need to be together and see that reality, what's the dangers, and what's going to happen. And if it happens once, we know how it runs before the presidency, it will happen again. It's going to be getting worse because now he has so much anger and he has something personal with the rest of the who is not in his sides. So it's going to increase, it's going to be bloody. He mentioned it's going to be bloody. It's going to be dangerous. So once we give him the power to run person and they're chaotic, it's going to happen. I think that's, we're not that far from this to happen if we give him the power to run people.
It's been reported that our lunch is being delivered, but just please just disregard the little commotion. It's been reported that in the campaign recently, Trump has been making a round of appearances at sundown cities. That is cities where it was against the rules of the city for black people to be in the city limits when the sun went down. This was a violation of federal law, but it was pervasive in many parts of the country, including in Southern California. One of the sundown cities near to where we are now was Culver City. And so we're honored to have as our first panelist on this round the former mayor of Culver City and the first African-American mayor of Culver City. Again, a former sundown city, Dr. Daniel Lee.
Culver City was a sundown town, but I'm from the South, Alabama in particular, Alabama and Florida. And when I was growing up, even in the 90s and late 80s in Alabama, it was like, this is a white city, this is a black city. Like almost 100%. If I saw a white person in the grocery store, I sort of freaked out. There was one white kid at the first school that I went to. I didn't learn until much later. I did a documentary on education and segregation. But when schools integrated in the South, a lot of school districts just closed, and white kids went to private school, and black kids did not have a school to go to for a while until things were so organized. But yeah, I was a council member, mayor in Culver City. Proud that we passed rent control, because we had zero rent control. Proud that we voted to close down the Inglewood oil field, and LA City and LA County used our legal reasoning to phase out neighborhood oil drilling in working class communities. They literally directly used it to talk to them about it. And LA City actually stole all of our rent control stuff, but whatever, still is good if it helps people. But what I have been doing more over the last 13 years now is working with Group to Amend. Our primary focus is to amend the Constitution around Citizens United and other cases. The notion that corporations are people and money is speech. Santa Clara County, 1886, Lopez versus Vallejo, 1972, and 1776, one of them. And then Citizens United, but that has been my major work. And that campaign is really focused on education. The difference here is that for women in particular, you know, there's a material threat to their lives under Trump. Reproductive health care is health care. For undocumented people, there is a material threat to their lives under Trump. It's not like it's not there under Harris, but it is real. And it always pisses me off, even being from the South, when people talk about undocumented people and immigration, because there are literally families who have lived here in California, New Mexico, Arizona in particular, longer than the United States has been a country. So for us to say, go back to where you came from, not acknowledging that, you know, these families have been here for generations, like 2, 3, 4 times as long as this country has existed, really fucking pisses me off. So as much as I do not shame people for voting third party, I do believe Trump is an existential threat to a whole lot more people, more specifically than it is to me, and definitely to most white people.
Next speaker also is a rank and file member of the United Auto Workers Local 4811, graduate student at UCLA. You know, I spoke a little bit introducing the first Local 4811 representative about the protest movement led by the UCLA students in support of Palestine. But the United Auto Workers have been leading militant actions across the country for various reasons. They led a national strike to shut down several of the major auto manufacturers a couple of years ago. Our Local 36 members went to the picket lines in, where was it, Riverside and San Bernardino? Okay. Then across the University of California, about a year and a half or so ago, the entire graduate student workers union went on strike against the University of California system, the largest college faculty strike in the history of the United States, to demand better working conditions. The president of the United Auto Workers, Shawn Fain, I don't agree with him on everything that he represents, but he has put out a call for all unions in the United States to prepare for a nationwide general strike on May 1st of 2028. I would say that we need to prepare a lot sooner than that, but there's not any other national union leader putting out any type of position calling for a nationwide general strike, except for maybe the flight attendants union. So our next speaker, Julian De Grottario.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I also don't maybe agree everything with our national president, which is Shawn Fain. But what we have to agree is that he's doing some things that maybe under previous presidents would never be imaginable. No? And because of that, it is that the government is actually trying to intervene through this federal monitor that is trying to go through all the documentation by these excuses of trying to find corruption inside the union. But we have already seen that this is because the person in charge of this monitoring of the union is in fact a Zionist. So I think in these moments it's very important to do this kind of meetings, not only to defend against fascism, but also against the Zionist threat, which are in fact very similar one to the other. No? We have faced the Zionist threat in our university directly, no? As well now in national level. And I also want to I guess focus on this question of the strikes as political strikes as economic strikes, because I think right now we are in a moment where with all that is happening in Palestine, the genocide that is occurring, it is only us through our unions and through making these political strikes the way we are going to actually be able to not only help our Palestine comrades, but also intervene in a good way in any other kind of conflict across the world, because it's only us, the workers, that can paralyze this economy and that can only pressure the government and everyone that is behind it, that tries to continue this massacre in Palestine. That is our only weapon, by striking, by paralyzing the economy, that we can actually transform things. And therefore that is why it is very important for us as workers to understand this and not only think about this Palestinian issue, but also now with this Trump possibly being elected president, how can we actually also make use of this tool in order to make sure not only that our conditions as workers are not, reduced or diminished, but also that we can also ensure other people that are maybe not unionized can also fight for themselves through our unions, through our political strikes. And yeah, basically I would say that, and I think it's a very good idea to be discussing here of how to start to organize, not only to defeat fascism, but also to build a workers' party, again, because that's the only way we are going to make sure all these fights we are doing, everything that we are fighting for is actually permanent and is not only a temporal situation.
Our next speaker, also a member of Local 36, Chuy Portilla. Chuy also is a first-generation immigrant worker from Mexico. He did not come up as a rank-and-file member of Local 36, but he worked in industrial factories, manufacturing, and organized a union in his workplace, for which he was retaliated against and fired. The AFLCIO national organization at that time was initiating an immigrant worker organizing campaign. And so they saw the effectiveness of Chuy's organizing skills and brought him into their apprenticeship organizer training. And then Local 36 was put into contact with him and hired him in to our staff as a professional organizer. So for several years, Chuy has been a member of a Local 36 and our lead organizer, both internally, keeping our members educated, informed, staying in contact with them, but also externally, organizing the 80% of the roofers and waterproofers in Southern California that are not members of a union, to make sure that they're aware of their opportunities to join the union, and as well to make sure that they're aware of their rights as workers, even if they stay at the companies that they're at.
Thank you everybody for joining today with us, to take the time to attend this conversation. A todos buenos días, gracias por tener tiempo de atender esta conversación. So, I grew up in Mexico, and as an immigrant, I just came to the United States to have a better life, just like mostly of the immigrants. And in Mexico, I was part of the transport unions, and we fight. I remember one time when a big developer come to our town and they buy big land. They try to develop a new houses for other people. They came with own machineries, with transportation. At that time, as a union member, we fight for that land to get, because it's in our town. We feel like, hey, this guy is coming and they're gonna take our jobs. And we fight for that. We just make a manifestation or a strike in a freeway, en la carretera de México. Tuvimos una manifestación para evitar que estos transportistas, que los grandes constructores llegaran, and we win. So I got this in my mind when I just came to the United States. I'm start working in an aerospace company. We start, at that time my boss, he was like that type of person. When I say, hey, good morning, he says, don't talk to me right now, motherfucker. So, and you know what I felt. Cuando trataba de saludar a mi jefe, me decía, hey, no me saludes ahorita, me decía una grosería. Yo me sentía raro. This is why I'm saying, it's not about the money, this is about the respect. You know, because this guy, he needs us to build these houses, to pay this daughter university. At that time, she was studying at big university. So why he treat us as like nothing, you know? And I tried to organize that company. We lost this unionizing because the other facts I can maybe next time I'm gonna have time to talk about this. When I started working with Local 36, it's catching my heart because it's a lot of people working that as the same thing as me. Immigrant people, mostly of the people, and I'm just thinking, this is my place to be. And when I start working with Local 36, it's a little bit more because the conditions start changing. You know, I'm just remember 1929, we started a campaign from the scratch with Cliff. Nobody support us. When I say nobody, it's like nobody. Only like a few people supporting us, non-unions. Everybody talk about the change. Everybody wants to have like different government, but nobody want to take an action.
Yeah.
You know, so no unions supporting us. The money we did because we want to build like a legitimate campaign. We didn't get money from the big corporations. So a few people donate some money, and we knocking door by door. We walk in all the District 8 community, and we develop relations with the community in that District 8. The result, the first time we failed. We short with 15 signatures. Second time, we decided to run again. Our members of Local 36 supporting to run again this campaign, but this time we've been successful, and we can put the Cliff name on the ballot. And we only raised $6,000. Yeah. The second man of the city council right now in Los Angeles is Marquis Harris Dassel. He's the second man. And he, at that time, he raised $300,000 against $6,000. And we take the second place. You know?
14%.
14% of that district supporting us. What I learned about this campaign, I learned the feelings of the people. Because I knock in the doors, the people. I see the necessity of the people. So, and I'm very happy to support Cliff or to support any other candidate who wants to run like a campaign, legitimate campaign, independent campaign. No Republicans, no Democrats. Thank you.
Is a resident of South Central Los Angeles, Westmont neighborhood. At Cal State LA, he, let me get it right, there's a couple hats. He's in Chicanos, Latin American Studies within the Pan-African Studies Department.
Two separate departments, I'm both.
Okay, it's too complicated for me. But also he was a faculty leader of the Palestine Solidarity movement at Cal State LA, and a lead organizer in the community of the Coalition for Community Control over the Police, as well as various other formations. So not just active on the campus, not just teaching the young men and women of the working class of Los Angeles, but also being a leader in his community. Dr. Johanna?
Muchas gracias por los que vinieron tomando, como dijo anteriormente Andrés, los que tomaron su tiempo para venir aquí compartir un sábado con nosotros en este día caluroso, este día feriado para muchos que son de las clases obreras, que quisieran pasar con su familia, pero aquí estamos, no en la bronca. Thank you so much, and I just want to echo what the compa Andrés said in the previous panel, you know, that here we have, you know, y'all came to share a Saturday that's beautiful and sunny and hot, and the day that the working class gets, right? Like to be at home with our families or be at home doing whatever we want to do, right? Y'all took the day here, so thank you so much. As Cliff said, I'm born and raised in South Central LA. My mom migrated from Guatemala. She's an indigenous woman. She left in 1973 as a genocidal war funded by the United States was going on, expelling tens of thousands of people from a place called Guatemala. It happened in El Salvador, it happened in Nicaragua, and to a lesser extent, in a lot of ways, right, it happened to Honduras, it happened to Belize, and it happened to, you know, all these different regions. And so people like my mother, and then people like my father migrated to a city like this. Mi mamá emigró aquí a este país en 1973 de Guatemala, cuando había una guerra que estaba matando a cientos de miles de personas, desapareciendo personas y también haciendo que nos tenemos que ir de nuestros países. Estaba pasando en todo Centroamérica. Mi papá también se vino huyendo la pobreza, la sequía de oportunidad que tenía. Mi papá trabajaba en fincas a los 6, 7 años. My dad worked on plantations from 6 to 7 years old in Mexico. That's where I come from. I have these little degrees, I have these little things behind my name, but I belong to those people. I belong to those lineages. So I stand for those people. All the grandstanding that happens in spaces like academia and all those things, I don't stand for that. Right? I'm about that action like Marshawn Lynch, you know, the NFL is coming back, right? Yo vengo de esa gente. Yo vengo de esa gente trabajadora. Yo vengo de esa gente, como les dicen unos académicos, los condenados del mundo. Yo vengo de esa gente. Yo no vengo de la gente donde trabajo ya ahorita. Soy profesor, soy catedrático, no sé cómo se dice en español. No vengo de esas áreas, estoy en esas áreas. A mí es la acción y las cosas que quiero cambiar en mi comunidad. Vengo de barrios populares, no vengo de las clases altas. Apenas tiene dinero un poco uno, you know? Y por eso me pongo en la lucha para que tenga la oportunidad otra gente, mis vecinos, mis sobrinos, mis primos, mis niños que nacen con cosas que son estructurales por el abandono sistémico que pasa, ¿no? Yo lucho por esa gente. Y pues muchas gracias por tenerme aquí. Espero contribuir un poco aquí más hasta esta conversación. I stand for those people, you know, the wretched of the earth, as Franz Fanon once said, right? I stand for the babies in the future, right? My nephews, my cousins, my neighbors. Some of them are unionized workers and some of them are just workers, and as Brother Mumia said, they're also just poor folks. Right? They're just poor people. You know, I still live in those communities, so those needs are very real. And I stand with those people, and I fight for those people. I live amongst those people, and those people are my people. So thank you again for having me here, and I hope I'm able to contribute something to this conversation that's worthwhile. Thank you.
People don't like hearing me say this, but the Democrats primarily are interested in themselves as a class. And a lot of people, no matter what background they come from, whether they grew up poor, or working class, or middle class, once they become elected, that is the class that they are. And their only interest is in making sure that that class is rewarded. I think it's both a strategic misstep and just like a moral misstep for the Democratic Party in general to not say the word poor. I think occasionally they'll say working class, but most of this country is poor. Like I said, I'm from the South. And poor in California is different than poor in Alabama. I grew up, like, I cook a lot, but like I cook a lot because my mom worked nights. So I started cooking like dinner 5-6 days a week when I was like 9, because my brothers were bad at it. And my sister was a feminist before she knew what feminism was. So she was like, I'm not cooking for y'all. But like most of this country is poor. And the thing that like boggles my mind is that, you know, poor is $30,000 a year in Alabama, but people exist on $30,000 a year in LA County, and that is unconscionable. The Democrats, I hate it when people say coastal elites and stuff like that, but to some degree, it's just about middle class people. It's about middle class people and rich people. If they wanted to strategically win and consistently win, they would do some of the things that are really basic that countries around the world that are ultra-capitalist still do. We would have universal health care. We would have universal family leave for men, women, non-binary, trans, whoever. You know, we would have a universal right to housing. People talk shit about China a lot, but like, you know, I went to visit a friend, I went to visit my cousin when she was completing her degree. If you want a job in China, you got a job. If you want a place to live in China, you have a place to live. Those are basic things. In China, like China's not communist, China's state capitalism, if we really want to get into it. But the Democrats, just to wrap up and not go way too long, the Democrats should be the party of the poor and the working class people. But more and more, like the first panel said, they use all the right words and they don't have any of the actions that actually address the needs of working poor people.
Well, I think Democrats and Republicans both represent the capitalist interests, both different sectors, whereas the Democrats may represent those capitalist interests that are interested in a more stable situation of the country. The Republicans, as opposed to Democrats, may represent those class interests that may want to even repress even more the workers, more than right now they are even repressed, because they want to extract even more profit from the workers. So I would think that's the main difference between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats only use this progressive discourse and everything to win votes, but I don't think at the end they actually fulfill their promises, and they may act more as containment of workers as opposed to Republicans that instead of containment, they just want to employ the stick. No? You say Democrats the carrot, Republicans the stick. No? But at the end, again, they both have, for example, support for the same kind of policies outside the country. No? All interventions outside, well, all interventions the US makes of other countries, I think they have bipartisan support, so there's no even discussion of that because they clearly have the same interests at that point. No? Outside, it's only inside where they may have different ways to work out with the kind of capitalist sectors they work with, but outside it's the same. And also the Democrats, I also don't think they are really that progressive, like outside the US. I think everyone would consider the Democrats as a right-wing party because that's what they are. They're more closer to neoliberalism than, I guess, socialism or whatever, no? But again, they are good at framing things in a way that appears as if they were actually going to do something, and they win votes like that, and that's the way they preserve the current conditions of the country that allow the capitalist class to continue thriving.
Since the moment that the candidate of Democrat Party accepts money from the big corporation, he represents that corporation interest. Right? So that's it.
Same for me, lo mismo para mí, porque los compañeros ya hablaron de todo. El Partido Demócrata representa los que hacen el maquinario para la guerra y la muerte y el genocidio, representa los intereses de los capitalistas y los imperialistas, y ahí estamos. The Democrat, I'm not going to belabor the point, I'm just repeating what Chu said, and then I think the brother said, both of them said it all. They represent weapons manufacturers and the capitalist class. That's it.
Okay, and so having said that, and I think there's agreement across the room, in the moment that we're in, is there an alternative campaign right now to defeat Trump in the November election, other than the Democratic Party, in this time, place, and condition? And what should be the working class's position toward the Democratic Party in election campaigns where the Republicans have organized support and can win power, such as this presidential election?
I'll just say, la pregunta es, ¿qué se puede hacer, no? ¿Qué alternativas hay, aparte del Partido Demócrata, para ganarle al vato no hay alternativa realmente ahorita. Hay tres campañas separadas, yo creo que se han visibilizado un poco, alternativas del tercer partido, y yo no sé si, no estoy diciendo que no se puede hacer una alternativa, porque lógico estamos aquí tratando de planificar, estratificar juntos para ver qué podemos hacer, ¿no? Para proveer y desarrollar un programa, una plataforma y un partido alternativo. Porque entendemos que no hay ahorita. Muchas de las campañas terceras ahorita son campañas de vanidad, la verdad. No, hay un partido ahorita, ese político, que no se puede ni subir a la balota en el estado de California. ¿Y no? ¿Cómo se pueden hacer las cosas si ni pueden subir al balote en California? Un tercer partido. Entonces uno tiene que trabajar en eso. So I basically said there really is no viable third choice right now. And again, I'm not here to discourage, right, the ability to fight, right? Like, I think people have to start somewhere, but there is no viable alternative right now. And I'm not casting aspersions on the reality that is a necessity, that we have to have an alternative to combat the duopoly, right? But it's not here right now. You have a campaign that's fighting to try to get on the ballot in the state of California that has a basis in the state of California, and they can't get up on that. This is not a viable alternative outside of the Democratic Party, right? Like, to defeat this guy, right, on that end. So there is no other kind of alternative, right, that keeps us in a very difficult situation. Brother Joe brought up, like, the contradictions and the tensions and all that, the historic realities of it, right? And we had a little discussion earlier about this, right? But there is really no kind of alternative right now, right, to win at this game, right? So that's just the reality. But there is the ability and the demand that we should be building that, and that's why we're here right now. And that's why a lot of us have been here. And I think our position as the working class in these campaigns need to take serious what Dr. Tina Bell Wright said in the previous one, right? There's 5 states that we really need to focus on to try to stem this guy from coming in and making our lives more difficult to keep fighting and building this a viable alternative, right? I think that's just the fundamental pragmatic reality that exists today. So I understand why people are funneled into that. I did want to say this on a national, actually no, I'll stop there. I'll stop there, so that's it.
Okay. As Alejandro says, it's not a direct campaign right now, but I believe that the only alternative is not allow Trump to take away a few resources resources that the working class has gained. So I'm happy to work again if any other candidate now it's late, but I'm saying locally, or no, not national, locally, support this candidate, independent candidate. I'm happy to work with this candidate. I'm going to support the candidate because no other alternative right now.
So I guess obviously the Republican Party represents right now the most reactionary interests, those capitalists that are not even good with the current conditions of the system, a system that already provides them with the capacity of repressing workers in order to extract profits. No? So they want to even do it more harsher. No? They want to actually even stop pretending that they care about workers. No? Like throughout this period, throughout these decades, well, more the Democrats than the Republicans, but they are the capitalists. No? They pretend to care about workers, they pretend to care about laws, they pretend to care about common goods, when in reality, it's the only thing they really care about is their profits. Now, again, the Democrats, the capitalists aligned with the Democrats, may still think about pretending about this. The Republicans stop pretending, caring about pretending they care about these things and have just removed their masks. No, that's basically the issue. Now, the Democrats, by them winning, they would only buy us more time, because the threat of fascism is not something that will end with this election. It's something that is the nature of the current state of the capitalist system throughout the world. So, okay, we can buy more time, maybe by the Democrats winning, but we'll face the same situation in the next election, unless we start thinking of building this independent party that is for our class interests. Not only that, but how to say? Sorry, I'm just checking my notes. We had some things. Yeah, well, I guess that said, I had an idea that I was going to say, but I forgot. But also, I guess if you start voting for Democrats, I think the most good thing, the best thing you can do is to extract concessions from the Democrats, not necessarily give your vote and let them use it as they want. Again, we have to start enforcing conditions so that the Democrats don't think they can always take our vote for granted. So yeah, that's basically what I would say.
So I'm going to answer this question a little bit sideways. I've had the opportunity to do a number of events with Jill Stein over the last 10 years, and I think one of the things we need to understand about the Green Party is there are certain rules in certain states where they have to get a certain number of votes in presidential elections for their local and county candidates to be able to run, and that's part of their motivation to run in general. That being said, obviously, you know, for the reasons I stated in the intro around women and undocumented people in particular, you know, Kamala Harris, fascist, still slightly better than Trump. Still, like, actually, you know, saves lives through her election. What I disagree with, and what the Democratic Party tries to convince people of every time there's a people's movement, is just wait until after the election. Just wait, you know, let's just win this election. I think strategically that is dumb as fuck, to use an academic word. I think I have been, throughout the 10 months of this fucking genocide, Jewish people Jewish Americans who have been advocating for Palestinians and the uncommitted movement being led by Arab Americans have been sort of my lifeblood, because I'm like, hey, I learned this in history, and history told me this was bad, and history told me never again, and I see a dead child every fucking day on my feed. This is some fucking bullshit. What I disagree with, yeah, go for Harris. Yes, Democrats, obviously, over Republicans, but their foreign policy on Gaza is the same. But the stuff that Biden ran against Trump on when it comes to immigration, he passed by an executive order. We need to challenge them now, while they're running. We need to say, hey, no, we'll vote for you if you do X. We don't need to say, hey, yeah, we need all hands on deck for you to just be slightly better than somebody else. We need to demand better now.
In regards to elections where the Republican Party has organized support and can win power, but we also want to ask, what should be the working class's position toward the Democratic Party in election campaigns where the Republican Party does not have organized support and is not a threat to win power, such as in local urban elections, like in Los Angeles for city government or for school board. And we do have as a special guest a candidate for city council that is on the ballot in the November election in District 14, Isabel Gerardo. Isabel is busy campaigning today and this weekend. She asked if she could come and address us. I told her that at 12:30 we would be finished with our second panel and break for lunch. We're running a little bit behind, and so we've asked her to sit with us if she's able to. Are we good? Then come on, please, and can we? Let me say that District 14, where Isabel is running, is currently under City Councilman Kevin De Leon. Ooh. Kevin De Leon is a statewide leader of the Democratic Party. He served in the state government. He wanted to run for Senate. Now he's in City Council, and he was caught 2 years ago in a clandestine meeting with the president of the City Council, Nuri Martinez, and with Gil Cedillo, at the offices of the County Federation of Labor, our union headquarters, with the president of the County Labor Federation, Ron Herrera, having secret meetings to try to interfere and sabotage the redrawing of the city council district boundaries in order to undermine black political power in Los Angeles. When Isabel ran, I think that nobody had ever heard of her. She's never run for political office before. There were two other statewide leaders of the Democratic Party that also ran. Miguel Santiago, who got the endorsement of almost all the unions, and Wendy Carrillo. Isabel, out of 8 candidates, came in first in the primary in March. She beat De Leon, Santiago, and Carrillo. She got the most votes out of any candidate in District 14. De Leon came in second. Local 36, to my knowledge, was the only union out of all of the unions in Los Angeles to support Isabel in her primary run. All the other unions went for the big name Democrats, Miguel Santiago, Wendy Carrillo. Our office in El Sereno is in District 14. Like Chewy said, we're proud and happy to be able to walk doors to talk to voters in District 14 in our neighborhood in El Sereno to make sure that we get rid of Kevin De Leon. Even President Biden called on De Leon to resign after he was caught on these racist recordings. So we're honored to have with us Isabel Gerardo. Local elections are important. All politics are local. So in 8 weeks, we have a choice whether Los Angeles returns Kevin De Leon to the city government or whether we have a fresh voice in Isabel Gerardo.
I want to say good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. My name is Isabel Gerardo. I'm a city council candidate here in Los Angeles, District 14. It's Eagle Rock, Highland Park, El Sereno, Boyle Heights, downtown LA, which includes Skid Row, Arts District, Little Tokyo, historic core. Thank you. Yeah, the historic core, and yeah, that is the district. I'm running against Kevin De Leon. I ran in the primary as a community candidate. I'm born and raised in Highland Park. I lived there all of my life. I'm still living in the house that I grew up in with my dad. In 2008, after my first year of private college, I actually dropped out because I got pregnant and I kept my, I decided to have my daughter. And it was the beginning of the 2008 recession where half my family lost their job. And so I went on food stamps, I went to community college, I had to take off class to go to social services to reinstate Medi-Cal for my daughter. Social worker was there when she was born. And so really through that experience is recognize my own privilege, language, citizenship, education, and saw the disparity in services. And that has always stuck with me and drove me to become an attorney and serving folks that are largely low-income and minority. And so I advocated for many things that were based on my lived experiences. I went to law school and decided to not take a corporate job. Instead, I defended workers against wage theft like my father faced when he was undocumented. He celebrated my mom getting pregnant, he got fired on the spot, right? His wages were, stolen from him. ICE had come to get him at one time. And so that stuff was visceral for me and real, and I was at the Labor Center in my undergrad and defended workers against wage theft when I became an attorney. I'm from Highland Park. I know what it was and now what it is, right? I saw so many neighbors. 2/3 of my elementary school classmates no longer live in Highland Park, the city, or even the state because the rent is too high, or they're a small business that was their family's livelihood had to close down, or they're like me, they're lucky, right? They live with their parents, and so that's why I've become an attorney to serve my community. And City Council actually serves all of these issues that we're talking about. Workers' rights, renters' rights, deciding what gets built in your community, make sure it addresses the current residents' needs, not just as abstract class, which ends up being the corporate class that we've been talking about here, right? Because in development of your neighborhoods in that process, rarely does the question of what does the community here currently need come into that process. And I've been thinking about those issues. That's why I became a community lawyer after being an eviction defense attorney. It was really hopeless work, felt like mitigating circumstances, and instead I wanted to help communities keep affordable through community land trusts to keep their rents low, small business rents low, or to preserve open space. And so I know we're talking about national politics, but when you go canvassing door to door, most of the things that people complain about actually can be resolved at the local level. And so having that happen here is super important. And I want to thank Cliff and the roofers and waterproofers for putting this on, because for me, you know, my core philosophy, I think about Fannie Lou Hamer and what she said, I'm tired about the symbolism, I want something material. And for me in city council, where the rubber literally meets the road, and we can look at our city budget, which funds street lighting less than 1%, which funds students and youth development less than 1%, and yet the LAPD gets a majority of our funding. We wonder why the lights aren't on and our kids are doing other things, right? We're not investing in what we keep talking about. And so with other folks on city council hoping to get a majority so we can finally get a budget that is reflective of what Angelinos really, really want, and instead of just getting, you know, these cute, pithy talking points, right? And get our material needs met. So thank you for giving me time. And you have a great array of speakers, and so thank you for letting me share space with you too.
I should also say that Isabel is the only candidate on that ballot that has openly called for an Israeli ceasefire and the end of genocide in Gaza. We need to have that voice in the city government. It's a disgrace that Los Angeles City Council has not voted already to demand a ceasefire of Israel and Palestine, like many other major cities across the country. Also, during the pandemic, there are many homes in District 14, El Sereno, that have been vacant, that are owned by Caltrans because they want to extend the 710 freeway, bought these houses decades ago, and then intentionally kept them vacant during a housing crisis and a viral pandemic. There was a campaign of unhoused people and their supporters to seize these homes and put unhoused people into these homes to protect them and to protect the rest of the community in a viral pandemic. The last thing we need is people living side by side on the sidewalks. And so in her professional career as an attorney, Isabel gave consultation and legal representation to the Reclaimers campaign to make sure that these people were protected from the police that were trying to break into those homes and evict these people during a pandemic. It's going to be a significant difference to have a candidate like Isabel in the city government rather than a piece of trash Kevin De Leon who's there now. Thank you very much. And so I think this brings us back to the question that was on the table, is that in local elections, where the Republican Party, like in Los Angeles, does not have organized support, what should be the position of the working class? What should be our position to the Democratic Party against candidates like Kevin De Leon, against candidates like Marquise Harris Dawson? We can run independent volunteer campaigns and get 10,000 or 20,000 votes in these districts and take control of these positions and take control of the resources and put those resources to work for the people against our enemies. This is the question.
We ran a campaign for City Council in District 8. So just like Isabel just shared, I'm born and raised in the 9th District, so of South Central, which a lot of people know as the lower bottoms. I grew up in those neighborhoods, and then we crossed to the other side of the 110 freeway, and I grew up in District 9 on the south side, closer to Southwest College. I went to Washington Prep High School. I took a bus to John Muir Middle School, right? Like I come from that, right? So the issues that Brother Andres and Chuy and Cliff and other folks who helped during the campaign, other community members, right, were knocking on doors and hearing the complaints of people who were homeowners, people who were renters, right, anywhere and everywhere in between. What we experience in our community is systemic abandonment, right? And so you don't have to do a lot of work, a lot of research just to understand the differences and the disparities that exist and that I've always grown up with in my community, okay? But I will share with you all District 8, for example. So in 2018, City and Community Health Profile was published by the County of LA, and the County of LA Public Health and Los Angeles County Health Agency is a Los Angeles Health County agency. Nearly 250,000 people lived in our district in CDA. 26% are young, 0 to 17 years of age, and 63% are 18 to 64, and 10% are 65 and over. almost 40% are African American or Afro-diasporic. 56% or 57% are Latinx folks. Only 1.77% of people that live in District 8 are white. Only 1.37% are Asian. So when I say I come from a black and brown neighborhood, I come from a black and brown neighborhood, right? That is hyper-segregated. And small numbers of indigenous and or Pacific Islander folks. 29% of our neighbors live at 100% at or below the federal poverty line, while another 55% live 200% at or below the federal poverty line. So we are black, we are brown, and we are impoverished. And when I say impoverished, I mean we are made to be impoverished, right? We didn't do anything to fucking magically be like, damn, I'm fucking poor. Like I wasn't born poor, I was made poor, right? Our community health index, like this has an impact on our children. I have a child who's about to turn 10 years old, who I understand by making a political decision to invest in my community and not move out, but reinvest in my community and stay where I'm at. I still live over there. I bought a house over there. I had the fortune to be able to buy a house before they skyrocketed. My kid is there, so I made a political decision that's impacting the future of my kid in this way. Life expectancy rates in District 8 are about 76.9 years of age. That's nearly 14% less than the best performing community in the county of Los Angeles, which is average lifespan is 87.5%. So we're talking about 9 to 11 years that I won't be around, given the averages in my community from my daughter, my grandkids, and maybe my great-grandkids. Because I've chosen to invest in a place that has jets flying over it, has a bunch of freeways crossing it, has a bunch of abandoned oil rigs and not abandoned oil rigs that are poisoning the territory and have been for decades, because nobody gives a fuck about us, where the cars fucking run you over. It's the most deadliest part, one of the deadliest places in the world for pedestrians in my neighborhood. Ain't no traffic lights. You know why? Because we've been systemically abandoned from investment, and that's usually what's necessary to reorient traffic laws. You know, it's very minute things that make our neighborhood dangerous, let alone the police terrorism that exists in my community, right? So then, one key stat is that in CD8, we have a lack of green space. There's only 0.53 acres for every 1,000 people in District 8, while the best performing communities in terms of green space have 53.32 acres per 1,000 people. The average acres per 1,000 people of green space in the county of Los Angeles is 8.1. We are nearly 0.5. We don't have parks. We don't have community gardens. I mean, we do. We're working towards it. So the reason I give you all this demographic shift is that we are more than these numbers. We're not just that, right? We fight and we struggle every day. I can tell you because I do that shit. So in my community, what we did is we ran a campaign, right? And we supported Cliff, and we will run again against the Democratic Party, specifically. The Democratic machine that exists in this Los Angeles, in this city and in this county. We already know, we can guess who the next in line to try to be in CD8 is. It's some of y'all homies. They come from the same system. The nonprofit industrial complex. They come from the same democratic ilk that was started by Karen Bass and Community Coalition. When Marquise Harris Dawson comes out of it. Where the other people that are going to come out and tell you and sell you all the good stuff, right, that you want to hear, they look like them too. They look like us, and they'll lie to your fucking face, just like they used to lie 40 years ago to you, right? So, what we did in my community is we took advantage of what is available, what people have fought for. In 2002, we have the Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust. They've advanced the availability of green spaces in places that have been abandoned. One of those green spaces is the West Athens Victory Garden on 105th and Normandy in District 8. I grew up right on that block. When I say right on that block, I'm talking about 12 houses down from where that garden was. I know what was there before that. It was a tire shop and a liquor store. I got shot at the first time in my life on that lot. We almost did some other things that could have changed my life forever on that block. And this Wednesday, we had the second to last installment of our community garden club where we bring black and brown elders and black and brown youth to move, to eat, to build, to dig in the ground, and to learn together. And I brought my graduate studies class into that park. I got to fulfill my purpose on Wednesday night on a block where I got shot at and almost got fucking killed. I'm surrounded by sunflowers and tomatoes and potatoes and all kinds of different things that people can eat. When I asked Dr. Michelle Brooks, when I asked Andres, what are the basic needs that are food, access to healthy food. We're doing that work, but we're not just gardening. It's a political bend to that. Because if you don't know your neighbors, you don't have an emergency plan, as one of our people talked about. And what does capitalism do but alienate us? So that work on a lower level is to understand that our enemies are all around us, they've abandoned us, but we still got us. So we want to run for power in that district. It's not about the name. It was Cliff Smith last election. It could be Alejandro Villalpando next election. And we want to be the fucking whirlwind. We want to take fucking power. Okay? Because we want resources for our people. I don't need shit. My people do. Thank you.
It's totally correct, no? And I think more than anything is that behind these independent candidates, we have to have a party structure. No? That's, I think, mainly the thing. No? Like coordinate all these efforts to gain these districts or whatever positions are these elections for. Besides that, I just wanted to make another point that was I didn't say last time, but it's just this idea that Democrats, by voting for Democrats, you don't necessarily are blocking fascism. Because if we review history, what happened in Germany, in Italy, it's not necessarily that the fascists won the popular vote. In many cases, there were already other parties in power, liberal, social democratic, that were the ones that allowed fascists to come to power. So that can only happen also with Democrats. No? They can always just say, oh no, let's stop dividing, let's unite the US, whatever, no? And let the Republicans, their fascist elements, to come to power. No? So that's also something to have in mind when we actually make this decision for whom to vote. But that's separate. No?
So, in contests where Democrats aren't running against a Republican, I think I'm going to say it simple, and then I'm going to try to not take too long to say the other part, but we just need to run. Like a lot of these people get elected again and again because no one's actually running against them. And the LA City Council is a case in point. It has been changing to some degree, but it's because incumbents have been challenged. Like LA City Council, before they consolidated elections, and you know, a city that's like, 4 to 6 million people, someone could win an LA City Council seat with like 20,000 votes. That's insane. Like, that is crazy in a city this large. But with like, and I disagree with them politically on a lot of things, but with Nithya Raman's campaign, with Hugo Soto's campaign, the Democrats were shaken up. But to my second point, in addition to having like that infrastructure to run the campaign, there needs to be backup legislative infrastructure for when they are in office. Because there are a lot of people like me, and I would count Isabel in this as well, who ran as Democrats because we wanted to actually win. But we're not Democrats. I'm not a fucking Democrat. I'm sorry, I don't want to offend you. But like, we have working class values, and we believe people should get paid a living wage, and people should have, live as like a baseline, not a handout, just like as just being a real human. But in order to win, you gotta run as a Democrat. There's a lot to be made in California about the fact that many times over the last few years, last decade or so, we've had a Democratic governor, a Democratic Assembly, Democratic State Senate. There's been a Democratic mayor in LA, in San Francisco. There's been almost exclusively Democratic, city council members, Democratic board of supervisors, and we still ain't got shit. Because a lot of these Democrats, if you go back to like 1985 or 87, they would be Republicans. Like, look at their policies, they're exactly the same. They're exactly the same. So the way that we get over that hump is that we actually run people, but we have that support after the fact if we get to the chance to win. Because if someone's a progressive superstar or a radical superstar, the minute they get elected, the party insiders are going to be showering them with praise and watering them down. So we need that after the fact support for those people to stay who they are and not just, because you get elected and all you think about is, hey, I need to get elected again. Not what you ran over. Not the people in your district who are sleeping on the street. Not the people who are starving. Not the fact that even the social services that we have are stupidly inefficient. Like the amount of money that they give you for food stamps, the amount of money that they give you for like general relief is insulting, and a lot of it you can't even get unless you are 100% homeless. That's too late. That's too late. But like, just to reiterate, and I don't think she would mind sharing, but like, you know, as soon as Isabel left, she was like, I'm sorry, I'm a stranger. Running for office is isolating. That's the other part. Like, a lot of these people who are running for office, every time I've run for office, I've been working full time the entire time. These other people that we're trying to replace who run for office, they ain't doing their assembly job, they ain't doing their state senate job, they ain't doing their city council job while they're running, they're just running. When we run, we're working, like we're doing at least 2 jobs. And we need support, like we need support and networks. So when we're talking about like, and I've seen it be effective where like one campaign team supports this candidate, they win, they move over to this candidate, they win, but there's not that after support. And without that after support, they just get sucked into the Democratic Party machine and they forget why they were running. The last thing, and I'll end on this so I'm not long, you know, the first time I ran for city council in Culver City, I lost by like 431 votes. And then when I was running again, a lot of people were like, well, yeah, obviously we supported you, we just didn't think you could win. And it's like, well, okay, well, if you voted for me, I could win. But, you know, I've also, you know, run for state senate and Congress. And when I ran for Congress, I tried to make a big deal about this. One, Cindy Kamlager came in first. There were a lot of very specific reasons I ran against her that I won't get into. Jan Perry came in second. Jan Perry ran just to push me out. But Cindy raised about like $1 million in the primary. Jan Perry raised $500,000. I raised $59,000. And I missed the runoff. Jan Perry came in ahead of me by 583 votes. She literally raised about $500,000 more than me, and I only lost by like almost 600 votes. It's possible if we support people, but just to reiterate and end on this, we have to support them during the campaign and after the campaign, because they're going to be sending money everybody's way if they actually succeed in order to get them to not do what they got into the race to do in the first place.
We've heard a lot about bourgeois electoral strategy. I think that one of the pressing issues, whether Trump gets elected or not, is to build independent mobilizations of the workers against the rise of fascism. Whether Trump gets elected or not, we need to organize the unorganized, undocumented workers. There is an organizing drive that needs to happen right now, needed to happen yesterday in the Inland Empire. That is to organize Amazon. I'm glad a Teamster brother is here today, Jose, and me and him have been involved in an Amazon organizing drive. I think there is a different class analysis out there rather than bourgeois electoralism, and that is independent mobilization and organizing. This is a motion I put forward in Amalgamated Transit Workers Union 1277, and it is being put forward in other union locals around the country, from Class Struggle Workers Portland, who, by the way, Cliff knows, called for break with the Democrats, Republicans, and all bourgeois parties, and organized one of the mobilizations against the rise of the Ku Klux Klan after Trump was elected in 2016. So I put forward this motion as an independent motion, independent class motion. Whereas the Democratic and Republican parties, which have shared an alternating power for a century and a half, have led U.S. society into a deep social and political crisis that poses existential threats to workers and oppressed people here and around the world. Whereas the Democrats and Republicans are both capitalist parties, defending and promoting the interests of the employing class. And whereas it's high time for the labor movement to ditch the endless parade of billionaire-backed capitalist politicians who keep promising, quote, change while things keep getting worse for the working class. And whereas Genocide Joe Biden's VP Kamala Harris fully shares responsibility for this administration's warmongering from the Middle East to Far East to Ukraine, and the strike-breaking legislation against rail workers that they in the Democratic Congress rammed through in 2022 while claiming to be pro-union and competing with the Republicans in targeting immigrants. And whereas Biden's replacement as presidential candidate, the former prosecutor, and California Attorney General Harris is and always has been part of the same Democratic Party machine that did nothing to prevent the elimination of constitutional right to abortion. And whereas Republican demagogue Donald Trump stokes all-sided bigotry and threatens authoritarian measures, feeding off frustration with declining living standards and job losses the Democrats have presided over for decades. And his VP pick, J.D. Vance, the far-right frontman for Silicon Valley plutocrats, insultingly pretends to speak for the working class while seeking to divide and conquer it with poisonous prejudices. And whereas despite the protests by millions in 2020, racist police terror, repression, and mass incarceration have continued under Democrats and Republicans nationally and locally, and whereas history in the U.S. and internationally has repeatedly shown that you can't fight threats to the basic rights of workers and oppressed people if our power is chained to the employers' parties and politicians, whereas unchaining the power of the working class is more urgent than ever, facing the growing threat of a third world war against China and Russia, and either a Democratic or Republican administration would continue to escalate. And whereas the bosses have two big parties that represent their class interests, while the million-strong working class has none, therefore be it resolved that since labor's continued subordination to the bosses' parties will only deepen the threats facing working people here and around the world, the Amalgamated Transit Workers, Local 1277, will not endorse or support the Democrats, Republicans, or any capitalist party in the elections, and be it further resolved that we call on the labor movement to break from the bosses' parties and politicians and build a class struggle workers' party that lead the struggles of working people and all those ground down by capitalism. Now, unfortunately, that motion was defeated. Why? Because my union leaders are so tied to the Democratic Party and the repressive apparatus. The main strategy is to break workers from this ball and chain relationship to capitalism. I say no support to the Democrats, no support to the Republicans. Let's move forward to a class struggle workers' party that unambiguously fights for socialism. Thank you.
I think that these working class struggles are critical. You have to build a working class party on real struggles. That's what you're talking about, are struggles we have in San Francisco. Pollution, Hunters Point, Treasure Island Shipyard, a radioactive dump site where they're building condos. Because Newsom, Kamala Harris, and the Democrats, Dianne Feinstein and Pelosi, were getting money to build condos on a dump site. Mostly black, brown people were contaminated, have cancer there. That's a class issue, it's a race issue, it's a working class issue. But I think the other thing that we have to, a couple things we have to talk about and we can address is, we have a political struggle in the unions. California Federation of Teachers. These unions, for example, the education unions, they're not, and higher education, they're not fighting for free admissions as part of their demand. They have a strike and they don't even mention the Democrats. The reason we have to pay money in California for education because they've been privatizing it, because they're not going after the billionaires. There's so many billionaires in California, they're not going after them. And I think we have to challenge the union bureaucracy politically, and we have to popularize the idea of a labor party. We need our own working class party that's going to have a program for working people, not for the bosses. And the Democrats in California are a party for the bosses. Newsom represents the bosses. These automated cars in San Francisco, they want to get rid of millions of drivers using automation, robo-taxis and robo-trucks. They don't care about working people who are going to lose their jobs in this industry. These are class issues, so maybe you can talk about the fight in your union and what the labor movement should be doing, because in San Francisco, what's happened, this business unionism have led to the fact that the billionaires now run San Francisco. They got kicked out of the county central committee. They spent all the money and time getting in the Democratic Party, and then they got kicked out by the billionaires. So they got nothing. So I think there's a great opportunity for working class independent candidates and an opportunity in the unions to say this is a dead-end strategy of supporting the Democrats.
Running candidates. If we're running candidates who are not responsible to a base and a structure, they're going to be swallowed into the Democratic Party. The question of running candidates, which I'm not against, raises the question, however, of how change happens in society. Individuals do not change history. Social classes in struggle, social movements do. So we want candidates who are connected to struggle and to issues and to local movements. It's very difficult to retain that connection through the Democratic Party, although in some instances, you have to run candidates in the Democratic Party. But you have to retain independent organization with that candidate. Otherwise, you're pissing in the ocean. Because that candidate, is going to be overwhelmed, is isolated, can't do anything. Because the apparatus of government is controlled by a two-party system that's intravenously connected to the corporate world. So again, the issue is how does change happen? The reason why Biden won was only because there was an uprising of black people in this country that inspired millions of white people to protest in the streets. And that movement educated people about the priorities. And people voted for Biden without us having to tell them to, right? So the reason why Biden won wasn't because we helped organize the Democratic Party. It was because an uprising ensued that shifted the political debate in this country and the balance of power.
But earlier I was going to make a point around both LBJ and the fact that, he used the N-word more than most gangster rappers. But like that he passed some of the most progressive policy in the history of this country because there was pressure, and I was going to go back to MLK. Like, JFK used to complain about MLK always having these demands and coming to the White House again and again and just saying that's not good enough. And I feel like some activists have fallen into the access trap where it's just like, oh, I get to be at the White House. I'm not going to be too disruptive. And that's some fucking bullshit. To what you said, like, the last 8 years of my life until he died in June, I've been working with Reverend James Lawson, and, we talk about movements, and we talk about movements as the only way anything has changed in this country. Politicians are ancillary, they're there, but it doesn't matter who they are if we are organized. And I feel like someone said it in the first panel, and I'll just end with this. The Republicans and the ultra-conservatives have been out organizing us for 65 fucking years, and they learned everything from us. They're not doing anything new. They're doing what we did, and we're staying home and posting memes and supporting Democrats and saying Kamala's brat and shit. And it's like, it's not that. It's like, Kamala, do what we need. Do what we need. It's more than about elections. Elections are a part of democracy. Too many people in this country think elections are democracy.
I totally agree with what Hamid said. And I think in our union, in fact, in UAW 4811, we have seen how if a candidate is not connected with the base, or at least at the beginning it's supposed to be connected, but at the end it shows that there's no strong link, then that candidate, even if it's claimed to be like very democratic, reformist, at the end will not really be like that. And that has been the case with Sean Fein, which again I was defending it a little bit briefly because of this issue of the federal monitor attacking our union, but the reality is that we as UAWD, UAW for a Democratic Union or something like that, I follow, we were a movement that we're fighting for, we are still fighting for democracy in our union. We fought for one vote, one member for the president. We fought for making Sean Fein finally get into power after many decades with this bureaucracy in our leadership. But at the end, Sean Fein, for example, didn't broke these relations that even our union has with the genocide in Palestine. Because even the funds in our union are somehow invested in those kind of weapon manufacturers that also help Palestine. On many issues, and he also offered endorsement to the Democratic candidate without even considering letting us discuss about it, voting about that. Like something that a real, let's say, Democrat, or like not in the sense of the party, no, but in the sense of the value of a democratic person, would not allow that to happen. No, in a real democratic union, everything should be voted, should be discussed by the union members, but that has not been happened because even this candidate that promised democracy has now separated from the base. No? So I agree totally that there's a need to have this link between the base and the candidates and the presidents and the leaders, no? Because the moment that link breaks, the candidate will just go towards other interests, no? And usually the prevailing interests, which are the ones of the capitalists, no? So it's, even if the perfect candidate wins, we should never demobilize, we should always be mobilizing, because if not, it will be other interests, the ones that